Admiral HFY stood before the massive viewing port of the Galactic Defense Station, watching the swirling nebula beyond with mounting dread. The crystalline formations on his forehead pulsed with anxiety as he reviewed the intelligence reports for the third time that cycle. The Krethak Empire had broken through the outer defense lines with brutal efficiency, their bioships consuming entire worlds in their relentless advance toward the core systems. "Admiral," came the melodic voice of his aide, Commander Velasay. Her butterfly-like wings fluttered nervously as she approached. "The Council has rejected our request for additional reinforcements. They say all available fleets are already committed to holding the Meridian sector." HFY's scaled hands clenched into fists. The Galactic Alliance had been at war with the Krethak for over 2 standard years now, and they were losing badly. The insectoid invaders seemed to adapt to every strategy, every weapon, every defense the Alliance threw at them. Their numbers appeared endless, and their hunger for organic matter drove them to consume entire civilizations without hesitation. "What about the emergency protocols?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "The Vrex Republic refuses to commit their motherships. The Celestial Dominion claims their psionic warriors are needed to defend their homeworlds. Even the machine intelligences of the Silicon Collective are pulling back to fortified positions." Velasay's voice carried the weight of defeat. "We're on our own, Admiral." The comm system crackled to life with an urgent transmission from the sensor array. "Admiral HFY to the command center immediately. We have incoming signatures on long-range sensors." HFY and Velasay rushed through the corridors of the station, past busy technicians and worried-looking officers from a dozen different species. The command center buzzed with activity as sensor operators hunched over their displays, tentacles and appendages flying over controls with practiced precision. "Report," HFY demanded as he took his position at the central command platform. Senior Sensor Operator Thrix, a 6-armed cephalopod from the aquatic reaches, swiveled to face him. "Sir, we're detecting 12 unknown vessels approaching from the galactic rim. They're on an intercept course with the Krethak Advance Fleet." "Unknown vessels?" HFY frowned. "Could they be reinforcements from an outer system we haven't heard from?" "Negative, sir. These energy signatures don't match anything in our databases. The ships appear to be primitive by our standards, but they're moving fast. Very fast. Put it on the main display." The holographic projector in the center of the command center flickered to life, showing a tactical overview of local space. The Krethak bioships appeared as angry red dots, numbering in the thousands as they swept toward the Alliance's last defensive line. But now there were 12 blue dots racing to intercept them, moving at speeds that defied explanation for ships of their apparent technology level. "Magnify the unknown contacts," HFY ordered. The display zoomed in, and gasps echoed throughout the command center. The ships were unlike anything they had ever seen. Where Alliance vessels were sleek curves of energy-efficient design, and Krethak bioships were organic monstrosities of living tissue, these newcomers were angular, brutal-looking machines. They bristled with what could only be weapons, far more armament than any ship their size should logically carry. "Sir," called out Communications Officer Nexura, her aquamarine skin flickering with bioluminescent patterns of distress. "The unknown vessels are attempting to establish contact. Put them through." The comm system crackled with static, then cleared to reveal a strange, bipedal creature with pale skin and oddly symmetrical features. The being wore what appeared to be a military uniform of some sort, with insignia that meant nothing to any Alliance database. "This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Earth Defense Force. We received your distress beacon about 3 months ago and came as fast as we could." The creature's voice was clear and confident, speaking in perfect galactic standard despite having no record in any known linguistic database. "We're here to help with your bug problem." Admiral HFY stared at the transmission in bewilderment. "Forgive me, Admiral Chun, but we have no record of your species or your Earth. How did you acquire galactic standard language protocols? We've been listening to your communications for decades. Picked up your first radio transmissions when we developed faster-than-light sensors. We've been preparing for this day ever since." Admiral Chin's expression grew serious. "We know about the Krethak. We know what they do to inhabited worlds. And We know how to stop them. 12 ships against thousands. Velasay whispered beside Zexhai. They must be insane. Admiral Chen seemed to hear her despite the distance. Not insane, Commander. Just human. We've dealt with swarms before, just not in space. The principle remains the same. Before Zexhai could respond, proximity alarms began blaring throughout the station. The Krethak advanced scouts had arrived at the system's edge, their bioships immediately beginning to breed and multiply as they consumed asteroid material. The alien vessels pulsed with sickly green light as they spawned fighter organisms by the thousands. Admiral Chen, Zexhai said urgently, you need to withdraw immediately. Those ships breed faster than they can be destroyed. We've lost entire battle fleets trying to engage them in direct combat. Noted and filed under things we expected, came the reply. All human ships, this is Admiral Chen. Execute Protocol Hornet's Nest. I repeat, execute Protocol Hornet's Nest. The 12 human vessels suddenly separated, spreading out in a complex formation that made no tactical sense to Alliance military doctrine. Instead of concentrating their firepower or taking defensive positions, they seemed to be deliberately exposing themselves to maximum enemy fire. What are they doing? Velasay asked in horror as the Krethak swarm began to surround the human ships. They're going to be overwhelmed in minutes. But then, the human vessels opened fire, and everything changed. The weapons they unleashed were unlike anything in the Alliance arsenal. Instead of precise energy beams or guided projectiles, the human ships spat streams of metallic death in every direction. Thousands upon thousands of projectiles filled space around them, each one moving at significant fractions of light speed. The Krethak bioships evolved to dodge and weave around conventional weapons, flew directly into walls of metal that no amount of agility could avoid. By the ancient codes, whispered Senior Sensor Operator Thrix, all 6 of his arms working frantically to process the data flooding his sensors. They're not using energy weapons at all. Those are kinetic projectiles. Thousands of them. How are their ships even carrying that much ammunition? The human formation began to move, and Zexhai realized with growing amazement that what had seemed like random positioning was actually a carefully orchestrated dance of destruction. As the Krethak swarmed toward one ship, it would fall back while 2 others moved to flank the alien formation, catching the bioships in a crossfire of devastating projectile streams. Admiral Chen, Zexhai called out, how is this possible? Our intelligence indicates that kinetic weapons are ineffective against Krethak bioarmor. Your intelligence is correct, came the reply as Chen's flagship executed a maneuver that should have torn the ship apart, spinning end over end while maintaining continuous fire. Kinetic weapons are ineffective against their armor. That's why we don't aim for their armor. On the display, Zexhai could see exactly what she meant. The human projectiles weren't trying to punch through the thick bioarmor plating of the Krethak ships. Instead, they were targeting joints, sensory organs, weapon apertures, and propulsion systems. Areas where armor was thin or non-existent, where a small projectile could cause disproportionate damage. But, more than that, the humans seemed to understand something about the Krethak that had eluded Alliance strategists for years. The bioships weren't just vessels. They were living creatures with all the vulnerabilities that entailed. The human weapons were designed not just to damage, but to cause pain, confusion, and panic. Impossible, breathed Commander Velasay as a group of Krethak ships broke formation, their movements becoming erratic and uncoordinated. They're making the bioships flee. How do you make a Krethak retreat? You hurt them. Admiral Chen's voice came through the calm, grim satisfaction evident in her tone. You hurt them badly enough that their survival instincts override their attack programming. It's a lesson my species learned a long time ago dealing with hive insects on our homeworld. The battle continued for several more hours, but its outcome was never really in doubt after the first few minutes. The human ships moved with a precision and lethality that spoke of extensive experience in exactly this type of combat. They never stayed still long enough for the Krethak to coordinate effective attacks, never clustered together enough to be caught in area effect bioweapons, and never stopped pouring devastating fire into their enemies. When the last Krethak bioship either fled or died, the human vessels regrouped near the Alliance station. Admiral Zexhai found himself staring at the tactical display in stunned silence. 12 ships had just destroyed or routed a Kretak advance force that should have been able to overwhelm a fleet 10 times their size. Admiral Chun, he said finally, I think we need to talk. The human's face reappeared on the main screen, and, for the first time, Zexhai noticed the scars that marked her features. Not decorative scarification like some Alliance species practiced, but the kind of marks left by actual combat. Her eyes held the steady gaze of someone who had seen terrible things and emerged stronger. I think we do too, Admiral Zexhai. But first, you should know that what you just saw was just a scouting force for us. The main human fleet is about 2 days behind us. She paused, letting that sink in. We came here to win this war, not just fight it. And we brought some friends you're going to want to meet. As if summoned by her words, new contacts began appearing on the long-range sensors. Not dozens, not hundreds, but thousands of ships emerging from hyperspace in perfectly coordinated waves. The energy signatures were clearly human, but the ships themselves varied wildly in design and size. Some were massive constructions that dwarfed Alliance dreadnoughts, while others were small, fast vessels barely larger than fighters. Admiral, Senior Sensor Operator Thrix called out, his voice tinged with awe. I'm reading over 5,000 vessels in the incoming fleet. And, sir, some of them are showing energy outputs that exceed our theoretical maximums for ships of their size. Admiral Chen smiled, and there was something in that expression that sent chills down Zexhai's spine. It wasn't cruel or malicious, but it was absolutely confident in a way that spoke of vast experience with violence. Welcome to the war, Admiral Zexhai. Real war, the kind my people have been fighting for our entire existence. We've been killing things that want to eat us since before we developed agriculture. The Kretak are just the latest in a very long line. She gestured towards something off-screen, and her smile widened slightly. We brought our A-team for this one. Every Deathworld veteran we could find, ships from colonies that have been fighting for survival since the day they were founded, crews that learned to fight in asteroid fields, and radiation storms that would kill most sapient life. The transmission flickered as Admiral Chun leaned forward, her eyes bright with anticipation. The Alliance has been fighting a defensive war, trying to protect what you have. We understand that, and we respect it. But now it's time to teach these bugs what happens when they threaten humanity's friends. Admiral Zexhai found his voice at last. What exactly are you proposing, Admiral Chun? Simple, she replied. We're going to take this fight to them. We're going to hunt down every Kretak hive ship, every breeding world, every spawning ground, and we're going to burn them all out of existence. But first, we need to know everything you know about their capabilities, their tactics, and their weaknesses. She paused, and when she continued, her voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. This war ends now, Admiral. One way or another, we're going to make sure these things never threaten another innocent world again. As the massive human fleet continued to arrive, Admiral Zexhai realized that his universe had just changed forever. For better or worse, the humans had arrived, and they brought with them a level of violence and determination that the galaxy hadn't seen in millennia. The question now wasn't whether the Kretak could be defeated. The question was whether anything would be left of them when the humans were finished. The briefing room aboard the human flagship Indomitable was unlike anything Admiral Zexhai had ever experienced. Where Alliance vessels prioritized efficiency and comfort, everything here seemed designed for function in the most extreme circumstances. The walls were lined with what appeared to be impact-resistant materials. The furniture was bolted down and reinforced, and the lighting could be adjusted from barely visible to blindingly bright at a moment's notice. Admiral Chen stood at the head of a holographic display that showed the current tactical situation across 3 sectors. Around the table sat representatives from what she called the Deathworld Coalition, humans from colonies that had faced extinction-level threats and emerged victorious. Each face told a story of survival that Zexhai was beginning to understand was common among these remarkable beings. Admiral Zexhai, I'd like you to meet my senior staff, Chen began. Colonel Marcus Rivera, commander of the Asteroid Belt Defense Forces. His people have been fighting in hard vacuum for 200 years, dealing with everything from solar flare storms to rogue AI mining platforms. Rivera was a compact man with prematurely gray hair and eyes that seemed to calculate trajectories even in casual conversation. He nodded to Zexhai with professional courtesy, but his attention remained focused on the tactical displays. Captain Elena Vasquez, formerly of the Titan Colonial Guard. Her unit held off a Kretak scouting force for 6 months using nothing but improvised weapons and mining equipment. Vasquez was younger than Rivera, but her hands bore the kind of scars that came from handling dangerous machinery under combat conditions. And Commander James Park, who led the evacuation of Proxima Colony when their sun went unstable. He managed to save 90% of the population using jury-rigged transport ships that should have fallen apart before they reached the first jump point. Park was tall and thin, with the kind of pale complexion that suggested years spent in artificial environments. But when he spoke, his voice carried absolute authority. The Kretak tried to follow the evacuation fleet. We convinced them that was a bad idea. Admiral Zexhai studied each human face, noting the similarities beneath their obvious differences. They all had that same quality he'd seen in Admiral Chun, a complete lack of fear when faced with impossible odds. It wasn't recklessness, it was the confidence of people who had survived things that should have killed them. Your species fascinates me, he admitted. Everything about your ships, your tactics, even your attitude toward combat is completely contrary to established military doctrine. How do you achieve such effectiveness with such apparently primitive technology? Chen activated the holographic display, showing a cutaway of a human battleship. Our ships look primitive because we build them to operate in environments that would destroy most Alliance vessels. Hull breaches, radiation exposure, gravitational anomalies, solar flare bombardment. These are normal operating conditions for us. The display zoomed in on the weapons systems, revealing the truth behind the devastating firepower they'd witnessed. Our weapons aren't energy-based because energy weapons fail when your power systems get damaged. Kinetic projectiles work just as well whether your ship is running on primary power or emergency batteries. And they work especially well when your enemy isn't expecting them. Commander Park leaned forward, activating a section of the display that showed ammunition storage and feeding mechanisms. The real secret is logistics. Most space-based civilizations design weapons that are efficient in terms of energy and storage space. We design weapons that keep working no matter what happens to the ship carrying them. But how do you carry enough ammunition for extended engagements? Velasay asked. She'd remained quiet during most of the briefing, but her tactical training was clearly engaged. Captain Vasquez smiled, and there was something predatory in the expression. We don't carry ammunition, Commander. We make it. Every human ship above cruiser class carries full manufacturing capability. Metal, ceramics, explosives. As long as we have raw materials, we can keep fighting. The implications of that statement hit Admiral Zexhai like a physical blow. You mean your ships are essentially mobile weapons factories? Among other things, Colonel Rivera confirmed. Our ships are designed to operate independently for years if necessary. We learned early that in space, resupply isn't guaranteed. So we became self-sufficient. Admiral Chun changed the display to show the current strategic situation. Red markers indicated known Kretak positions across multiple star systems, while blue markers showed human fleet positions. But there were also yellow markers that Zexhai didn't recognize. Those are autonomous defense platforms, Chen explained, noticing his confusion. We've been seeding them along our approach route for the past 3 months. Each one is designed to operate independently, manufacturing and deploying weapons platforms as needed. You're building a supply line, Zexhai realized. But not for ships, for manufacturing capability. Exactly. By the time this campaign is over, we'll have established a permanent industrial presence in this sector. Even if every ship in our fleet is destroyed, those platforms will continue producing weapons and defensive systems. The scale of human planning was becoming clear, and it was staggering. This wasn't just a military expedition, it was a systematic colonization effort disguised as a relief force. But instead of being alarmed, Admiral Zexhai found himself feeling something he hadn't experienced in months: hope. Admiral Chun, what do you need from the Alliance to implement your strategy? Information, primarily. We need detailed intelligence on Krethack biology, ship construction methods, and breeding cycles. We also need to understand their command and control systems. She paused, studying the tactical display. And we need to know about any Alliance assets that can be converted to support our manufacturing requirements. Commander Park activated another section of the display, showing a detailed breakdown of resource requirements. We're particularly interested in any Alliance facilities that work with exotic matter or high-energy physics. Our weapons are effective, but we have some ideas for upgrades that require specialized knowledge. Velasay looked up from her data pad, where she'd been taking notes. Admiral, the Vrex Republic has extensive expertise in exotic matter manipulation, and the Silicon Collective's manufacturing capabilities are unmatched in known space, both of which have been reluctant to fully commit to this war, Admiral Zexhai noted. Perhaps a demonstration of human capabilities might change their perspective. Admiral Chin's expression became thoughtful. That brings up an important point. We need to discuss how we're going to coordinate with existing Alliance forces. Our tactical doctrine is based on rapid movement and overwhelming firepower. Traditional Alliance formations are designed for defensive operations and measured responses. In other words, Colonel Rivera added bluntly, your people are going to have trouble keeping up with us. The statement should have been insulting, but Admiral Zexhai found himself nodding in agreement. He'd seen the human ships in action, and their speed and aggressiveness were unlike anything in Alliance tactical manuals. What do you suggest? He asked. We operate as a separate command structure, but with full intelligence sharing and coordinated objectives, Chen replied. Your forces continue holding defensive positions and protecting civilian populations. Our forces hunt down and destroy Krethack strategic assets. Captain Vasquez activated a new display showing projected fleet movements. We've identified 17 high-priority targets in this sector alone. Hive ships, breeding facilities, command nodes. If we can eliminate them in rapid succession, we can collapse their entire local command structure. The plan was ambitious to the point of seeming impossible, but Admiral Zexhai was beginning to understand that impossible was a concept these humans didn't seem to recognize. How long do you estimate for the completion of this operation? He asked. 6 weeks. Admiral Chun replied without hesitation. Maybe 8 if they have more defensive installations than our intelligence suggests. 6 weeks. The Alliance had been fighting this war for over 2 years, losing ground constantly. And these humans thought they could end it in 6 weeks. The confidence was either inspiring or insane, and Admiral Zexhai was no longer sure there was a difference. Admiral, Velasay said quietly, I'm receiving an urgent communication from Alliance High Command. They want a full report on the human fleet capabilities. Chen looked at Admiral Zexhai with raised eyebrows. I assume this is the part where your government decides whether we're allies or a new threat to worry about. Unfortunately, yes. Some members of the Council are concerned about introducing an unknown military force into an already complex situation. Understandable, Chen replied. But they should know that we didn't come here to join the Alliance or seek their permission. We came here to eliminate a threat to inhabited worlds. If the Alliance wants to help, we welcome the assistance. If not, we'll proceed alone. The casual dismissal of galactic political complexity should have been arrogant, but somehow Chen made it sound like simple fact. These humans had traveled across the galaxy to fight a war that wasn't theirs, and they clearly intended to win regardless of local politics. Commander Park stood up from the table, checking a device on his wrist. Admiral, the fleet is reporting full readiness for combat operations. All manufacturing platforms are online, and reconnaissance drones have confirmed the location of the nearest Krethack hive ship. Excellent. Chen turned back to Admiral Zexhai. Admiral, you're welcome to observe our first major engagement if your government is interested. It might help them understand what we bring to this conflict. Admiral Zexhai considered the offer. Watching the humans in action again would certainly provide valuable intelligence, but it would also commit the Alliance to at least tacit approval of human methods. What's the target? He asked. Hive ship designation Tango 7, currently located in the Kepler 442 system. It's been breeding attack ships for the past 3 months and represents a significant threat to civilian populations in this sector. Chin's expression hardened. It's also responsible for the destruction of at least 6 inhabited worlds. That decided it. Admiral Zexhai had seen the reports from those worlds. Billions of sentient beings consumed to fuel Krethak expansion. If these humans could stop even one hive ship, it was worth the risk. We'll accompany your fleet, he said. But I need to warn you, hive ships are heavily defended. They carry their own fighter swarms and are protected by multiple layers of bioarmor. Admiral Chen smiled, and for the first time, Admiral Zexhai saw something genuinely frightening in that expression. It was the smile of a predator that had found prey. Admiral, let me tell you about the time humans fought a species of space-dwelling organisms in our home system. They were each the size of a small moon, heavily armored, and they reproduced by consuming entire planets. She paused, letting that sink in. We killed them all, every single one, down to the last spawn. The briefing room fell silent except for the soft humming of ship systems. Admiral Zexhai realized that he was looking at beings who had fought their way to the top of not just one evolutionary ladder, but dozens of them across multiple worlds and environments. The Krethak think they're apex predators, Chen continued. They're about to learn what that term really means. The Kepler 442 system had once been home to the melodic consensus, a peaceful civilization of crystalline beings who communicated through harmonious vibrations. Their cities had rung with beautiful songs that could be heard across continents. Now, the system was a charnel house of organic machinery and spawning bioships that pulsed with sickly green light. Admiral Zexhai stood on the bridge of the human flagship Indomitable, watching the tactical display with a mixture of fascination and horror. The Krethak hive ship dominated the inner system like a cancerous growth, its tendrils extending deep into what had once been the fourth planet. Swarms of fighter organisms moved in complex patterns around it, while larger bioships emerged from breeding cavities with disturbing regularity. Jesus Christ, muttered Commander Park as new sensor readings came in. That thing is 3 times larger than our intelligence estimates suggested. Admiral Chen studied the tactical display with cold professional interest. The hive ship was indeed massive, nearly 800 kilometers from tip to tip, with dozens of subsidiary breeding chambers and defensive installations. Worst of all, it was actively consuming the planet's crust to fuel its growth. How many ships has it spawned since arriving? Chen asked. Approximately 4,000 combat-capable vessels, ranging from fighter-class organisms to cruiser-sized attack ships, reported Lieutenant Singh from the sensor station. And, sir, we're detecting at least 12 more hive ships in deep space, moving toward this system. Admiral Zexhai felt his hope beginning to fade. Even the human fleet, impressive as it was, couldn't possibly engage 13 hive ships simultaneously. But Admiral Chen showed no sign of concern. Perfect, she said, which was absolutely not the response Zexhai had expected. They're concentrating their forces. That makes this much easier. Easier? Velese asked in disbelief. Admiral Chen, that's enough Krethak biomass to consume a dozen star systems. Commander Velese, let me ask you something. When your people first encountered the Krethak, what was your primary tactical response? Velese looked confused by the question. We attempted to establish communication, then tried to negotiate territorial boundaries when that failed. And when they refused, we formed defensive perimeters around critical systems and attempted to contain their expansion through superior technology and coordinated fleet actions. Admiral Chen nodded. Classic civilized species response. Defensive, measured, designed to minimize casualties on both sides. She turned to face the Alliance officers. What you're about to see is how a species that evolved fighting for every scrap of resources handles an infestation. She activated the ship's communication system. All vessels, this is Admiral Chen. Execute Extermination Protocol 7. Target priority is the hive ship's reproductive systems, followed by command and control nodes, followed by anything that moves. The human fleet began to move, and Admiral Zexhai immediately saw that their approach was completely different from any Alliance tactical doctrine. Instead of forming organized battle lines or defensive formations, the ships spread out in what appeared to be random patterns, each vessel moving independently at maximum speed. Admiral, Lieutenant Singh called out. I'm detecting massive energy buildups from all human vessels. They're charging weapons systems I've never seen before. Admiral Chun walked over to a control panel that Admiral Zexhai hadn't noticed before. It was covered with warning labels in multiple human languages and secured with what appeared to be multiple locking mechanisms. Admiral Zexhai, I need you to understand something before we begin. What you're about to witness is not typical space combat. These are weapons and tactics we developed for dealing with extinction-level threats in environments where failure meant the death of our entire species. She began entering a complex code sequence into the control panel. We call them genocide protocols because that's exactly what they're designed for. The complete elimination of a hostile species that cannot be reasoned with, negotiated with, or coexisted with. The lock mechanism disengaged with a series of mechanical clicks, revealing a single red button beneath a clear protective cover. In our history, we've had to use these protocols exactly 7 times. Giant space-dwelling organisms, biomechanical plagues, AI constructs that consumed matter to reproduce, artificial life forms that converted organic matter into copies of themselves. Chen paused, her hand hovering over the button. Each time, we learned something new about how to kill things that shouldn't be able to die. Admiral Zexhai realized he was holding his breath. Around him, the human crew worked with calm efficiency, showing no sign of the tension he felt radiating from his own people. The Krethack reproduced by consuming organic matter and converting it into copies of themselves. They spread by overwhelming local defenses and establishing new hive sites. They're essentially a galactic cancer. Admiral Chen's voice was completely steady. And we know exactly how to treat cancer. She pressed the button. The transformation of the human fleet was immediate and terrifying. Every ship simultaneously fired weapons that Admiral Zexhai's sensors couldn't even properly classify. They weren't energy beams or projectile streams. They were something that seemed to interact with space itself, creating distortions that propagated faster than light toward the Krethack hive ship. What in the name of the ancient codes are those? Admiral Zexhai breathed. Quantum disruptors, Commander Park replied matter-of-factly. They interfere with the molecular bonds that hold complex organic structures together. Specifically, they target the unique protein chains that Krethack bioships use for structural integrity. The first wave of distortion struck the hive ship's outer defenses, and the results were immediate. Krethack fighter organisms simply came apart, their complex bioarchitecture unraveling at the molecular level. Larger ships lasted longer, but even they began showing signs of structural failure within minutes. But the hive ship itself was too large and too well protected for even quantum disruptors to destroy quickly. Its outer layers began to slough off like diseased tissue, but new growth immediately began replacing the damaged sections. It's adapting, Admiral Zexhai observed with growing dread. They're always able to adapt. To conventional attacks, yes, Admiral Chen agreed. But we're not conventional. She activated another control system, and Admiral Zexhai watched in amazement as the human ships began launching what appeared to be small shuttlecraft directly at the hive ship. But these weren't evacuation vessels. They were moving too fast, and their flight patterns were too aggressive. Boarding torpedoes, Captain Vasquez explained. Each one carries a specialized insertion team equipped for close-quarters combat in hostile biological environments. You're sending people inside that thing? Velasay asked in horror. Not people, Colonel Rivera corrected. Specialists. Humans who volunteered for genetic modification and cybernetic enhancement specifically for this type of operation. They can survive in hard vacuum, resist biological contamination, and operate effectively in environments that would kill normal humans within minutes. Admiral Zexhai watched the tactical display as dozens of boarding torpedoes penetrated the hive ship's outer hull. Each one carried a team of what the humans called breach specialists, soldiers who had volunteered to become something more than human in order to fight humanity's wars. What are they doing in there, he asked. Planting charges, Admiral Chen replied. But not conventional explosives. We call them biological cascade weapons. They're designed to trigger a feedback loop in the hive ship's organic systems, essentially causing it to consume itself. The explanation was interrupted by urgent alerts from the sensor station. Admiral, the incoming hive ships are accelerating. They're going to arrive in the system much earlier than projected. How much earlier? Chen demanded. 6 hours, maybe 7. And, sir, we're detecting additional Kretak signatures beyond those 12 ships. It looks like they're calling in reinforcements from across the sector. Admiral Zexhai felt ice form in his stomach. Admiral Chun, we need to withdraw. If more Hive ships arrive before you can finish with this one, your fleet will be surrounded and overwhelmed. Admiral Chun was quiet for a long moment, studying the tactical display. When she spoke, her voice carried a tone that Admiral Zexhai was beginning to recognize as extremely dangerous. Admiral Zexhai, how many inhabited worlds are there in this sector? Approximately 400, with a total population of roughly 200 billion sentient beings. And how long would it take the Kretak to consume them all if we withdraw now and leave this Hive ship intact? Admiral Zexhai did the calculation in his head and felt sick. 8 months, maybe less. Then, we don't withdraw. Admiral Chun turned to her communication officer. Signal the fleet. All vessels are to prepare for extended combat operations. We're going to finish this. Admiral, Commander Park said quietly. With respect, we can't fight 13 Hive ships simultaneously. Even with our advantages, the math doesn't work. Admiral Chun smiled, and Admiral Zexhai realized with growing amazement that it was a genuinely happy expression. These humans were about to face impossible odds, and their commander was enjoying herself. James, you're thinking conventionally again. We're not going to fight 13 Hive ships. She activated the communication system again. All vessels, prepare to execute Prometheus Protocol. Full sterilization parameters. The bridge fell silent except for the sound of human crew members checking and rechecking their equipment. Admiral Zexhai had no idea what Prometheus Protocol entailed, but the way the humans were preparing for it suggested something significantly more destructive than anything they'd used so far. Admiral Chun, he said carefully, what exactly is Prometheus Protocol? She turned to look at him, and, for the first time since he'd met her, Admiral Zexhai saw something resembling uncertainty in her eyes. But it wasn't fear, it was the look of someone about to cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. It's something we hoped we'd never have to use, she said quietly. We developed it after we realized that conventional weapons, even our most advanced ones, might not be sufficient for certain types of threats. She gestured toward the tactical display, where the Kretak Hive ship continued to spawn new attack organisms despite the ongoing assault. The Kretak reproduce faster than we can kill them with conventional weapons. So we developed an unconventional solution. Admiral Zexhai waited, but Admiral Chin seemed reluctant to continue. Finally, Commander Park spoke up. We're going to turn the local star into a weapon, he said simply. Prometheus Protocol involves the controlled destabilization of stellar nuclear processes. In approximately 30 minutes, this system's sun is going to undergo a directed coronal mass ejection that will sterilize everything within 2 light hours of its surface. The words hit Admiral Zexhai like a physical blow. You're going to destroy the entire system? We're going to purify it, Admiral Chen corrected. Remove every trace of Kretak contamination and ensure they can never use this location as a staging area again. The approaching Hive ships will be destroyed along with everything else. Admiral Zexhai stared at her in shock. And your own ships? We'll withdraw to a safe distance after the stellar modification is complete. Admiral Chen's voice carried absolute certainty. We've done this before, Admiral. We know exactly how much time we have. As if to emphasize her point, proximity alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The first boarding teams were reporting successful penetration of the Hive ship's core systems, and massive explosions were beginning to tear through its internal structure. But even as the local Hive ship began to die, Admiral Zexhai could see more red dots appearing on long-range sensors as additional Kretak forces responded to the threat. Within hours, this system would be swarming with hostile bioships. Unless Admiral Chun could turn the sun itself into a weapon, Admiral Zexhai realized that he was witnessing the moment when the balance of galactic power shifted forever. These humans hadn't just brought advanced weapons to the war against the Kretak. They had brought a level of ruthless determination that the galaxy hadn't seen in millions of years. The question now wasn't whether they could win. The question was what the galaxy would look like when they were finished. The next 6 hours passed in a blur of coordinated destruction that Admiral Zexhai would remember for the rest of his life. He watched from the bridge of the Indomitable as human engineering teams worked with terrifying efficiency to modify the fundamental nuclear processes of an entire star. Stellar modification at 60% completion, reported Chief Engineer Thompson, a compact woman whose cybernetic implants allowed her to interface directly with the ship's quantum computing systems. Magnetic field generators are in position and functioning within normal parameters. Admiral Chun stood at the center of the bridge, surrounded by holographic displays showing everything from stellar mechanics to approaching Kretak fleets. Her calm competence in the face of such overwhelming complexity was beginning to make sense to Admiral Zexhai. This wasn't the first time she'd orchestrated the destruction of an entire star system. Status report on the Hive ship? Chen asked. Internal charges have destroyed approximately 70% of its breeding chambers, Commander Park replied from his station. However, it's attempting to evacuate its core consciousness to one of the subsidiary ships. Not going to happen, Admiral Chen said flatly. She activated a communication channel to the boarding teams still fighting inside the massive bioship. Team 7, this is Admiral Chen. Execute cleansing protocol on the core consciousness chamber. The response came back immediately, spoken by someone whose voice sounded more machine than human. Acknowledged, Admiral. Beginning neural acid deployment. Core consciousness termination in progress. Admiral Zexhai had stopped trying to understand the full implications of human weapons technology. Neural acid, quantum disruptors, biological cascade weapons. Each new revelation suggested a species that had spent centuries developing ways to kill things that should be unkillable. Admiral, called out Lieutenant Singh, the advanced elements of the Kretak reinforcement fleet have entered the outer system. 12 Hive ships and approximately 50,000 escort vessels. Admiral Chen studied the tactical display, where red dots were spreading across the outer system like a plague. The Kretak weren't just sending reinforcements, they were committing everything they had in the sector to this battle. Good, she said, which was still not a response that Admiral Zexhai could understand. Signal all human vessels to begin final withdrawal sequence. We have 18 minutes before stellar modification reaches critical threshold. Around them, the human fleet began an intricate dance of withdrawal that somehow maintained continuous fire on Kretak positions while steadily moving towards safe distance. Admiral Zexhai had seen Alliance tactical manuals that claimed such coordinated movement was impossible under combat conditions, but the humans made it look routine. Admiral Chan, he said, I need to ask you something that's been bothering me since we met. How many star systems have you destroyed in your wars? She was quiet for a moment, checking readings from the stellar modification process. Destroyed? None. We don't destroy stars, Admiral. We redirect their energy output for tactical purposes. The stars themselves are always reparable once the immediate threat is eliminated. That's not what I meant, and you know it. Admiral Chun turned to look at him, and he saw something in her expression that was both sad and implacable. 7 systems, Admiral. 7 times in human history, we've been forced to choose between sterilizing an entire star system and allowing a threat to spread across the galaxy. She gestured toward the tactical display, where the dying Hive ship was still spawning attack organisms even as its internal structure collapsed. Each time, we tried every alternative first. Negotiation, quarantine, conventional military action, even attempted relocation of hostile species to uninhabited systems. And, Admiral Zexhai prompted, and, each time, we learned that some threats can't be contained, can't be reasoned with, and can't be allowed to continue existing. The Kretak are one of those threats. The communication system crackled with a report from the boarding teams. Admiral, core consciousness termination confirmed. The Hive ship is brain dead, but its automated systems are still spawning new organisms. Understood. All boarding teams, immediate extraction. You have 15 minutes to reach minimum safe distance. Admiral Zexhai watched as small craft began launching from the dying Hive ship, each one carrying humans who had voluntarily entered a living nightmare to complete their mission. The extraction was conducted with the same ruthless efficiency as everything else these people did, but He could see on the medical monitors that casualties had been significant. How many? Admiral Chun asked quietly as the last extraction craft cleared the hive ship's defensive perimeter. 47 Kia, 93 WIA, 16 MIA presumed consumed. Commander Park reported in a tone that suggested this was routine information, well within acceptable parameters for a core consciousness termination mission. Admiral Zexhai stared at them in shock. Acceptable parameters? You just lost 47 people. Admiral Chun said gently. Those 47 people volunteered for a mission they knew had a high probability of being fatal. They did it to save 200 billion innocent lives. That's not a loss. That's a victory. The way she said it, with complete sincerity and no trace of callousness, drove home to Admiral Zexhai just how different these humans were from every other species he'd encountered. They calculated acceptable casualties the way Alliance quartermasters calculated supply requirements. Stellar modification at 80%, Chief Engineer Thompson reported. Magnetic containment fields are stable. We're ready for directed discharge on your command, Admiral. On the tactical display, the Kretak reinforcement fleet was rapidly approaching the inner system. Thousands of bioships moved in complex formations, their living hulls pulsing with bioluminescent communication patterns. It was the largest concentration of Kretak forces Admiral Zexhai had ever seen in one place. Are they always this predictable? Admiral Chun asked as she studied the enemy formation. What do you mean? Admiral Zexhai replied. They're bunching up in the inner system, probably trying to coordinate a massive assault on our positions. It's tactically sound for most types of warfare, but she shook her head with what might have been amusement. They have no experience fighting an enemy that can weaponize stellar phenomena. She activated the communication system one final time. All vessels, this is Admiral Chun. Minimum safe distance has been achieved. Commencing Prometheus Protocol final phase. All hands, prepare for stellar event. Chief Engineer Thompson's hands moved over her control interfaces with practiced precision. Magnetic field generators synchronized, initiating controlled instability in stellar core processes. Countdown to coronal mass ejection, 60 seconds. Admiral Zexhai found himself gripping the arms of his chair as the countdown proceeded. On the main display, the system star began to show signs of unusual activity, solar flares erupting from its surface in patterns that definitely weren't natural. 30 seconds. All vessels report ready. Directed discharge will proceed on schedule. The Kretak fleet, apparently sensing something was wrong, began trying to withdraw from the inner system. But they were too late and too close together. When the star unleashed its artificially triggered coronal mass ejection, the directed stream of superheated plasma and radiation caught them while they were still in formation. The effect was immediate and absolute. Kretak bioships, evolved to survive in the vacuum of space but not designed to withstand the equivalent of standing on a star's surface, simply ceased to exist. Their organic hulls burned away in milliseconds, leaving nothing but rapidly expanding clouds of ionized particles. Admiral Zexhai watched in stunned silence as 12 hive ships and 50,000 escort vessels were destroyed in less than 10 minutes. The sheer scale of destruction was beyond anything in his experience. An entire invasion fleet eliminated by turning their own sun against them. Stellar event concluding. Chief Engineer Thompson reported. All targets within the directed discharge zone have been eliminated. The star is returning to normal parameters. Admiral Chun nodded with satisfaction. Excellent work, Chief. Begin post-event analysis and prepare a full report for Fleet Command. She turned to Admiral Zexhai, who was still staring at the tactical display in amazement. That concludes our demonstration, Admiral. I believe this system is now secure from Kretak infestation. Secure. Admiral Zexhai managed to say. Admiral, you turned a star into a weapon. How is that even possible? Controlled stellar manipulation has been part of human military doctrine for over a century, Commander Park explained. We developed it originally for large-scale planetary engineering projects, but it proved useful for dealing with extinction-level threats. Admiral Chun checked her chronometer and activated the communication system. All vessels, prepare for jump to the Vega system. Intelligence reports indicate 3 more hive ships have established breeding operations there. We'll deploy sterilization protocol 4 upon arrival. Admiral Zexhai felt a chill run down his spine. There are more protocols? Admiral Chun said with what might have been sympathy. We have contingency plans for threats that haven't even evolved yet. The Kretak are dangerous, but they're not the worst thing the universe can produce. She brought up a new tactical display showing the locations of Kretak operations across the sector. We're going to visit each of these locations in turn and eliminate the infestation. Complete sterilization, no survivors, no possibility of regeneration or adaptation. The scope of what she was proposing was staggering. Not just winning the war, but ensuring that the Kretak could never pose a threat again. It was genocide on a galactic scale, carried out with the same methodical efficiency humans brought to everything else. How long? Admiral Zexhai asked quietly. 3 weeks to clear this sector completely. Another month to hunt down any scattered hive ships that try to flee. After that, we'll need to conduct follow-up operations to ensure no hidden breeding sites remain. Admiral Chin studied his expression with evident concern. Admiral, I know this is difficult for your people to accept. The Alliance has spent centuries building a civilization based on negotiation, cooperation, and peaceful coexistence. What we do must seem monstrous to you. Admiral Zexhai considered her words carefully. Admiral Chun, my species has been fighting the Kretak for 2 years. In that time, we've watched them consume dozens of worlds and billions of innocent people. We've tried negotiation, containment, even attempted to find uninhabited systems where they could be relocated. He gestured toward the tactical display, where the remains of the Kretak fleet were still visible as expanding clouds of debris. Nothing worked. They can't be reasoned with, can't be contained, and can't be coexisted with. You did in 6 hours what we couldn't accomplish in 2 years. He looked directly at Admiral Chun, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. You're not monsters, Admiral. You're what the rest of us become when we've run out of civilized options. Admiral Chun was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight of experience that Admiral Zexhai was only beginning to understand. The universe is not a civilized place, Admiral Zexhai. Civilization is something that has to be defended, maintained, and sometimes fought for. The Alliance represents the best impulses of sapient life, the desire to cooperate, to build, to create something better than what came before. She gestured toward the viewports, where the human fleet was already preparing for their next engagement. But sometimes, in order to preserve civilization, you need people who are willing to do uncivilized things. That's what humans are for. As the human fleet jumped toward their next target, Admiral Zexhai realized that the galaxy was about to change in ways that no one could have predicted. The Kretak threat would be eliminated. He was certain of that now. But when the humans were finished, the fundamental balance of galactic power would be permanently altered. The age of gentle cooperation was ending. The age of human pragmatism was about to begin. 3 months after the first human ships appeared at the edge of Alliance space, Admiral Zexhai stood in the Grand Assembly Hall on Galactic Prime, facing the largest gathering of sapient species in recorded history. Representatives from over 300 civilizations filled the vast amphitheater, their various forms creating a tapestry of evolutionary diversity that normally would have filled him with pride for galactic civilization. Today, however, the mood was different. Fear, uncertainty, and something approaching awe permeated the assembly as species after species reported the same impossible news. The Kretak were gone. Not defeated, not contained, not negotiated into withdrawal, completely and utterly eliminated from known space. The final confirmed Kretak destruction occurred in the Outer Rim territories 2 days ago, Admiral Zexhai reported to the assembly. Human forces located and sterilized the last known breeding facility. There are no remaining Kretak signatures anywhere in the galaxy. A murmur of voices, clicks, harmonics, and telepathic static filled the hall as representatives struggled to process the magnitude of what had been accomplished. The Vrex Republic's prime speaker, a crystalline being whose thoughts appeared as shifting light patterns on his surface, was the first to respond. Admiral Zexhai, the efficiency of this extermination campaign defies comprehension. How many star systems did the humans destroy in the process? None permanently, Admiral Zexhai replied. which caused another wave of confused communication throughout the hall. The humans possess technology that allows them to manipulate stellar phenomena for tactical purposes without causing permanent damage to the stars themselves. In total, they use directed stellar events in 17 systems to eliminate concentrated Krethack forces. The representative of the Silicon Collective, a geometric construct of pure mathematical logic, projected its thoughts directly into the Assembly's translation systems. The computational requirements for such precise stellar manipulation exceed our modeling capabilities. How is such coordination possible? Admiral Zexhai activated a holographic display showing the final statistics of the human campaign. The humans operate with a level of tactical integration that our military theorists previously considered impossible. Every ship in their fleet functions as both an independent unit and part of a larger coordinated system. Commander Velasay stepped forward from her position behind the Admiral's podium. She had accompanied the human fleet for the entire campaign and had been profoundly changed by the experience. Honored representatives, I observed human combat operations for 12 weeks. What they accomplished requires a fundamental reconsideration of our understanding of warfare itself. She activated additional displays showing human fleet movements during key engagements. The humans don't fight wars, they solve problems. When they encounter an obstacle, they develop a solution and implement it with absolute precision. The Krethack were not defeated by superior technology alone, but by superior thinking. The Celestial Dominion's psionic ambassador, a being of pure thought energy that existed in a containment field, projected its concerns directly into the minds of all present. Its voice carried the weight of collective consciousness. The human's capability for violence exceeds any species we have encountered. What assurance do we have that they will not turn these abilities against Alliance worlds? The question hung in the air like a physical presence, and Admiral Zexhai could feel the tension in the hall intensify. This was the core fear that had driven the emergency assembly. Not gratitude for humanity's intervention, but terror at the implications of their power. I spent 3 months observing human military operations, Admiral Zexhai said carefully. In that time, I never saw them commit a single act of unnecessary violence against non-hostile targets. Their rules of engagement are actually more restrictive than Alliance standards in many respects. The Aquatic Federation's speaker, a massive cephalopod floating in a mobility tank, gestured with multiple tentacles as it spoke. Admiral, restrictive rules of engagement have little meaning when discussing a species capable of destroying entire star systems. How do we coexist with beings who possess such devastating capabilities? Before Admiral Zexhai could respond, a new voice cut through the Assembly's communication systems. It was Admiral Chun, speaking from the human fleet still stationed at the edge of Alliance space. Honored representatives, I apologize for the interruption, but I believe I can address your concerns directly. The holographic projection system activated, showing Admiral Chun standing on the bridge of the Indomitable. Behind her, Admiral Zexhai could see human crew members going about their duties with the same calm efficiency he'd observed throughout the campaign. I understand your fear, Admiral Chun continued. You've watched us eliminate what you considered an unstoppable threat, and now you're wondering if you've simply traded one danger for another. That's a reasonable concern. The Silicon Collective's representative projected another query. Admiral Chun, your species' military capabilities suggest technological advancement far beyond what should be possible for a civilization originating from a single world. How do you explain this apparent contradiction? Admiral Chun smiled, and Admiral Zexhai was glad to see it was the warm expression he'd learned to associate with her diplomatic mode, not the predatory one she wore during combat operations. We're not more technologically advanced than the Alliance, she explained. In most fields, you're actually ahead of us. What we have is focus. Every aspect of human society has been shaped by the need to survive in environments that actively try to kill us. She gestured to someone off-screen, and the display shifted to show images of human colonies. We build our cities to survive hurricanes, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions. We design our ships to operate when everything goes wrong simultaneously. We train our people to make life or death decisions under extreme stress, because for us, that's just Tuesday. The melodic consensus representative, one of the few survivors of the Kretax attack on their homeworld, spoke with harmonic tones that translated as deep emotion. Admiral Chun, we are grateful beyond measure for your intervention. But the power you demonstrated, how do we know you won't use it to impose your will on peaceful civilizations? Admiral Chin's expression became serious. Because we have something that prevents us from becoming the kind of threat you fear. We have experience being the victims. The display shifted again, showing historical records of human conflicts. Every weapon we've developed, every tactic we use, every protocol we follow, we created them in response to threats that tried to exterminate us. We know what it's like to be on the receiving end of overwhelming force. She paused, letting that sink in. We also know that the most dangerous enemy is one with nothing left to lose. We have no interest in creating more enemies for ourselves, especially when we've just spent 3 months proving that we make very reliable allies. The Vrex Republic's speaker pulsed with patterns that indicated deep thought. Admiral Chun, what does humanity want from the Alliance? What are your terms for the assistance you've provided? We don't have terms, Admiral Chun replied, which caused another wave of confused communication throughout the assembly. We didn't come here seeking territory, resources, or political influence. We came because inhabited worlds were being consumed by hostile aliens. Commander Park stepped into view beside Admiral Chun. The Alliance represents something we value highly. A peaceful coalition of diverse species working together for mutual benefit. That's the kind of galaxy we want to live in. The Celestial Dominion's ambassador projected another thought. Asterisk, your actions suggest capabilities that could be turned toward galactic conquest. Why should we believe you have no such ambitions? Asterisk, Admiral Chun was quiet for a moment, and, when she spoke, her voice carried a weight of absolute sincerity. Because we've already been a galactic power, and it nearly destroyed us. The hall fell completely silent. Admiral Zexhai realized that this was the first time Admiral Chun had revealed anything about humanity's broader history. 500 years ago, human civilization spanned 47 star systems and included over 60 billion people, she continued. We had the technology, the resources, and the military capability to expand across the entire galaxy. The display showed images of vast human installations and massive fleets that dwarfed even what the Alliance had seen. We also had internal conflicts, competing ideologies, and the arrogance that comes with believing your species is destined to rule everything it encounters. Admiral Zexhai watched in fascination as Admiral Chun described humanity's rise and fall. The civil wars that followed lasted for nearly 2 centuries. When they ended, human civilization had been reduced to 12 worlds and 8 billion survivors. We spent the next 300 years rebuilding and learning from our mistakes. She gestured toward the human fleet visible through the viewports. What you see now is what we became after we learned that power without wisdom is just another form of extinction. We could conquer the galaxy, representatives. We have the capability. But we also have the knowledge that doing so would eventually destroy us just as thoroughly as any external enemy. The Aquatic Federation's speaker stirred in its tank. What do you propose, then? How do we move forward knowing what we now know about human capabilities? Admiral Chen smiled again, and this time it carried genuine warmth. We propose exactly what we've been doing. The Alliance continues to handle diplomacy, trade, cultural exchange, and all the normal functions of galactic civilization. And when something shows up that wants to eat everybody, you call us. She paused, then added with a slight grin. Think of us as the galaxy's immune system. Most of the time, we're not needed and you don't think about us. But when a serious infection threatens the whole organism, we're there to handle it. The Silicon Collective processed this for several computational cycles before responding. You are proposing a permanent defensive alliance with no territorial or political demands. We're proposing to be the neighbors who have good tools and don't mind helping with serious problems, Commander Park clarified. We maintain our own territories, you maintain yours, and when something threatens galactic civilization, we work together to eliminate it. Admiral Zexhai stepped forward. Honored representatives, I've seen humans in combat and in peace. They are exactly what they claim to be, a species that has learned to survive by being very, very good at destroying threats to their survival and the survival of their allies. He gestured toward the holographic display. The question before us is not whether we can trust them. They've already proved their trustworthiness by eliminating an existential threat to our civilization. The question is whether we're wise enough to accept their offer. The Celestial Dominion's ambassador projected one final thought, carrying the weight of collective consideration. Asterisk, and if we refuse? What then? Asterisk. Admiral Chen's expression became diplomatic again. Then, we return to the Outer Rim, establish our own territories, and continue monitoring galactic communications for signs of extinction-level threats. We hope such threats never emerge, but if they do and you need help, you know how to reach us. The assembly erupted in communication as representatives debated among themselves. Admiral Zexhai could see the fundamental divide that was forming, species that had been saved by human intervention arguing with those who had only heard reports and feared the implications. Finally, the melodic consensus representative spoke for all the survivors of Krethak attacks. We vote to accept humanity's offer. They saved our worlds when no one else could. That is worth any risk. One by one, other species added their voices to the agreement. Not unanimous. Several of the more powerful civilizations abstained or voted against, but a clear majority in favor of the alliance. Admiral Chen nodded respectfully. Thank you, representatives. We look forward to a long and peaceful association with the alliance. As the connection closed and the assembly began to disperse, Admiral Zexhai realized that galactic civilization had just crossed a threshold from which there could be no return. They now had allies who could turn stars into weapons and eliminate entire species with terrifying efficiency. But they also had allies who had chosen cooperation over conquest, wisdom over dominance, and protection over predation. As he left the assembly hall, Admiral Zexhai reflected on how much had changed since that first desperate day when 12 human ships had appeared at the edge of Alliance space. The galaxy was safer now, but it was also fundamentally different. The age of human guardianship had begun, and despite all his fears and uncertainties, Admiral Zexhai found himself looking forward to seeing what kind of future that would create. After all, when the next threat to galactic civilization emerged, and there would be a next threat, they would be ready. The humans would see to that,